This is something I had been wanting to make a video about for the last 2 months thereabouts, but I promised an involved party that I would wait until I could prove that I am serious about key matters on my own part before even writing up the script at all. I will talk about that first, because I should mention that I had been wanting to get mental health support for a while, even going as far as to refuse a flu shot at a doctor's visit last month in determination to make sure something would get set up. But bureaucracy got in the way of that over a matter of $54. Yes, freaking chump change creating a technicality keeping me from services that, as I can show with evidence involved in in politics in my parents' house, I should have had back in 2017 to begin with. And it's just as well I failed to get any momentum with that when I'm dealing with a money situation right now. Although thankfully it should be alleviated before too long, but I'm not going to get anywhere with the mental health stuff until I'm provided a passable structure. Thankfully, however, there is a bright spot, even if it is created by more stupidity. On the advice of somebody who I've been pretty much working with for a while, who I think is mentioned has no active stake in the politics with my parents' house beyond perhaps being a witness, I went down to the county assessor's office early this month in hopes that I could at least arrange something with my parents' house. When I got there, I find out that they did not know that my parents have been deceased. Obviously, I fixed that, particularly by filing a couple of forms for making as much clear to them, which makes it clear that yes, I'm doing something about this, but that no other family members ever came around to handling this definitely proves how they don't care. Because if they did, something as simple as directing me to the assessor's office would have covered for this. Now, those forms, which are under government control, are proof positive that people in my life did not lift a finger about the common sense matter the entire 4.5 years between my mom's death and when that exploitative ex-landlord of mine kicked me out for calling out his arrogance. I'm not even sure this will be worth all the trouble anymore, but I gotta try, right? So, that covered, I need to start talking about the Mings mess yet again. I had posted the outtake video of Link to the Past involving Ganon's Tower, particularly to call out that apparently women don't find me funny, but they do find Mangs funny, even though Mangs doesn't keep his humor clean and considerate in the least. The fact that he wanted to add blatantly perverse dialogue to one of his ROM hacks with nary the smallest hint of nuance should tell you as much. That's not even going into how humor isn't even everything, even if it does help any ladies have fun in the first place. But if you don't believe me that Mings is just scummy, that he has no standards in regards to women, then let's go over the way he handled Goosefone and Anime North. I will use a three-strike system, and I will apply a strike for each moment that gives me enough reason to be outraged. Let's begin with the preparations. Kusafon needed to save money in our accommodations because she was already spending on travel money. A point I can't believe I missed after all my complaints about Jitface and victim blaming Matthew Pug, although that's irrelevant here. The travel money thing comes up because of an unfortunately deleted YouTube community post. Anyway, to manage the R&R stuff, Kusafon was needing to share a room, and who did she consult but Mangs? Mang's first part remarked that he cared about his personal space, but in the same conversation he was saying about wanting to share his room with Goosefone. And then he promised, and I quote, I won't touch you anime doors. Yeah, let's make this clear. Mangs, well before 2019, was already known to be lecherous. Yet he made no effort to consult the rest of the group with whom he was able to work with. Instead, he indulged in suspiciously manipulative behavior already. Even if you could say that Goosefone was cutting corners, Meg still had something to exploit to begin with, to set up a situation that had too many risks toward Goosefone without giving her acceptable provision of any welcome alternative, breaking her choices already. So you know what I call this? I call this Strike One! Getting onto the events at Anime North, Mangs didn't waste much time with the suspicious behavior, although Kusafon didn't think much of Mangs bursting in on her changing in her cosplay costume because of given pressures involved. But on the evening of May 25th in 2019, Kusafon fell asleep in the room of another Anime North panelist, Vanguard, and Mangs abruptly woke her up against the protests of Chazia Aria LLC, with multiple witnesses seeing as much. Okay, why? Goosebone was clearly tired. Mings is deciding to just basically drag her back to the room that she has been reluctant to share in the first place. I would think if he cared about her, he would give her a blanket, which even if he was worried about germs from himself, he's at a hotel and there should be management willing to share bed stuff with guests as room service. Mings never even considers being some comforting comforter because he didn't want to. Strike two! I need a drink after that particular bite too. And of course, on the morning of May 26th, 2019, Gustafone woke up to Mings pulling sexual contact with her. She did not know what had happened prior to her waking up, but let's not forget to add that Gustafone was drunk the previous night anyway. A detail that most people ignore every bit as much as I had ignored about the detail of the travel money. If somebody is drunk, they're more likely to be stupid and lose, and then they would likely forget the happenings of their stupor, and when they would awake the next morning, when they would have no idea of how things happened. In Vino Veritas be a material. Mangs exploited this! But I don't even need to talk about Goosebone being intoxicated in the first place. No, I can just talk about Goosebone finding herself in a situation at all. This happened because Mings did not have his way with her when she was asleep. This was explaining her lack of choices, and most daringly, this was with no checks at all for her happiness. Strike three, Mings! You're out! Now, people have seen fit to keep victim blaming Kusapon. While I personally would be sugarcoating this to not say that Mings Kusapon would be sugarcoating. While I personally would be sugarcoating this to not say that Kusapon made an obvious deal with the devil, a concept that I know will deconstruct in general, going along with this video. This did not change that the majority of responsibility for this idiocy lies at Ming's feet. Mings knew what he was doing. He simply did not care. I also wish to talk about another user who had been wronged by Mings, and this was actually recent, within the last 2 months in fact. So this concerns a development since I had planned to make this video in general, but I may as well cover it anyway. The user in question, in spite of all the evidence against Mings, had helped to make that egocentric Advance Wars 2 ROM hack, making it far easier for Mings to monopolize Advance Wars content on YouTube, particularly the no casualties runs. However, the user got cold feet when Mings then paid another person for assets against past agreement that no money payment would be involved at all with the egocentric ROM hack. When that happened, I got a DM on October 7th from the user saying that they were wanting to apologize to me. If you're wondering how I feel about this, I would actually be willing to accept the apology if I could be sure it was genuine. But let's consider this stuff. The user had shown sadism toward my person that Mangs couldn't have made him do, nor did it concern Mangs in the first place. The user's additional bias towards Mangs made everything worse as well. Most importantly, though, is that the person in question already had a track record of flip-flopping. Let me tell you about unreliability. I call it idiots in real life that I'm forced to work with for making me rely on them only for them to be unavailable when needed to damaging effect. And oh boy, am I making use of the assessor's office business to deconstruct that mess because the politics with my parents' house already concerns them too. When somebody wants to be unreliable or simply refuses to care, they're not worth your trust. This is why I didn't say anything about the claim of apology. And even now, I'm making it clear to the user that he's going to have to show actively that he means it, that he should work at fixing the problems involved. Otherwise, well, he's not the first person who owes me an apology, and I doubt that he will be the last. Also worth bringing up is my worsened race in general. I will say this about having previously talked positively to Mangs at all in the past. I suppose I was as weak as Mangs, as weak as the Advanced Source subreddit, all desperate for good Advanced Source content from a popular creator to liaise with them. But I should have realized from the start when I was already refusing to deal with Uprising Coliseum and the Kidakers Uprising communities for their racist jokes It's not worth supporting somebody who's not only blatantly toxic, but encourages toxicity in general as well. I can particularly mention that the likes of the Mings Empire will still be saying that my voice is abhorrent or some such, that I sound like I'm talking through a wood chipper, which is the exact sort of garbage I have had California spew in my direction, so of course I would be on the internet to outmaneuver that mess. Boy, does that pay off still less than I'd like, even with some of the steadfast support that I still at least get. And God, what I so stupid to give into the idea of mocking that mess, and the women who enable us much. That doesn't change my points, but even so, all I can say is that I'm glad that a few people still listen to me regardless, including a guy from a more watery part of Texas. I'm not saying any more about him in public for reference. Regardless, Mangs has shown toxicity toward me from the start, and he also involved that HMAD video that mocks people who are unhappy about the addition of Byleth, whose sword user number 81,018,001, Fire Emblem character 81,018,001, and anime character 81,018,001. The first of those three not being helped by the trailer acknowledging it and saying to just get used to it. I can at least be glad that when Mangs posted his claim of having gone through an abusive childhood on July 4th, 2020, which was 4 days before the allegations, I wasted so little time demanding proof and for Mangs to own up to his behaviors as is. I was not aware of anything about the sexual allegations that were about to come out against him. I was focused on telling him and his sycophants in the Fire Emblem community to do things like call up their friends, pulling the harassment that they have pulled against me, like they already did on one of Romeo's videos sometime back. I can tell you, according to these communities, the definition of harassment is what they say it is for their convenience in these mockery campaigns of theirs. Big hint, it isn't. It's not even close. There's a reason I do not sympathize with kickback in the least, especially when they claim, with no evidence, that Vic Mignogna is the legal definition of harassment. And I've had to suffer on that angle because of the arbitrary politics that they created there too. My point is that at the very least, I recognize without any need of popular opinion that Mangs' post was manipulative, even if hindsight gives me the benefit of seeing the manipulation as sociopathic. The people who opposed me for my comment thread need to apologize for me. My mockery of the opposition was simply to make sure the thread would explode to create curiosity about what the blazes I was talking about. Instead, well, we see when people like Ephraim225 only care to support Mings after the allegations come out. Now, this brings me to the big subject of the video, to make sure that this isn't about beating a dead horse at this point, because this is meant to be about a problem not for Mings or sycophants, but for Mecca, keeping in mind that Mecca has become one of Mings' biggest detractors. I have some good word that Mecca actually has a habit of ghosting people, the informant in question having been hit by as much like I was. It's a problem when the likes of the informant is already helping with combating the abuses by Mangs, as evidenced by how he was able to tell me that Mel is in fact refusing to collaborate with Mings after learning just a modest amount. God knows I needed to hear about that, by the way, after my hyperventilating from knowing that women, especially vibrant personalities, only care about funny people, and they had already been wanting me to just be some obedient little robot just so I would be unattractive, to have me be some punching bag. Mecca blocking people without explanation shows a simple unwillingness to communicate. Apparently, he's worried about confrontation, but if so, there's the problem that the likes of the Mings Empire want targeted. As I've just testified. It doesn't work as an excuse at the point where tribalism is blatantly involved in the same lack of empathy that I had to deal with on July 4, 2020. And this is what I can deduce on my guesswork, by the way. I have no way to confirm anything, especially when I'm already subject to harassment anyway. And for reference, this has been to the point where I have worried about trolls tracking me based on my directly calling out how a late 40s woman was made uncharacteristically lifeless by blatant overworking. Which, by the way, I had witnessed during the Kincaid fire, some 8 or 9 months before the allegations against Mings came out. I originally did not comment again about Mecca ghosting me because I could already tell how this would have just given the Manx Empire yet more ammo. I had already seen that infighting caused by allegations towards Shazaria LLC had allowed Mings to attack the credibility of his primary detractors, even when the veracity of the allegations against Chaz is irrelevant in light of Mings' own actions. Actions that are already backed by a dangerous pattern of proven behaviors. We are talking about people happy to exploit ad hominems where they can. Or did you guys miss the point where they already bashed on my voice? The sight of more infighting between detractors of Mangs would have been something that would have made them happy, and how they want their entertainment to be as flashy and trashy as possible, even when everything is loud and flashy on its own, and all Mangs adds into trash. It's really no different from the mess involved with House Democrat, who I have seen get accused of cannibalizing upon itself, and not without reason. What is involved with that is a house divided nest created by people running the show being arrogant. Just look at what I had to deal with in regards to the ex-landlord. He deliberately overcrowded a house under the pretense of providing shelter to other people. In the same breath where he withheld important information in the interest of getting more money for himself. Money I could have used to get something going with my parents' house. You don't make excuses for impractical behaviors and say you're simply in the right. And I am not going to care about claims supporting the lunacy of the ex-landlord, especially when it comes from members of a state that isn't a swing state to begin with, because those claims are simply biased. House Democrat has problems like that, and one that Double M, who himself is clear-cut Democrat and against the mistreatment of women, where he calls out Japan for it repeatedly, thankfully recognizes or show that they don't have common sense. Efforts to combat Mings do not need similar problems getting in the mix. I am recognizing that this needs some public calling out, nevertheless. This is not a light decision as I have just outlined, and after already experiencing the hard way about Romestrel's apathy 2.5 years ago, I am knowing that there are no guarantees that this will get sufficient support. What I do know is that this needs to be done regardless. Broken communication had been a problem I was calling out back in 2017, even well before my mom's death. It's been a persistent problem that leaves a god-awful mess as well, and I can cite about the issues with my parents' health about why communication breakdown being involved causes problems. As I repeat, the assessor's office did not know that my parents were deceased until I reported them earlier this month, already 5 years after my mom's death. There's no dispute that I didn't care, not when I proved myself willing to spend $120 on a round trip quite a while back in an effort to use my parents' house as a reference point against favoritism of the rich. I simply did not know about the assessor's office, but everybody else in real life has no such excuse to fail to do so much as sign me a task in the entire 4.5 years since my mom's death that I was living under the thumb of that exploitative ex-landlord. Even directing me to the assessor's office would have been something, especially when I was already local to do that. But no, they just basically said, not my problem, even when that was inaccurate. I'm sorry, I thought I lived in California, not Texas, the state that has even the sight of a particularly heinous mass shooting overwhelmingly vote for the guns advocates. My point is that Mecca shouldn't be ghosting people to begin with. He already has the likes of Who's This Kid finding him to be elitist. If he's ghosting people, he's not having his case in that regard. Not when it invalidates whatever his reasoning would be. And that's a problem when it claims that the people against being forced stunts against women to be in the wrong. Here's something I could get to bringing up. That Mecca would prefer to be able to stay friends with Mings, but can't stand for Mings' conduct in general. Now, we can't force people to change how they feel about somebody, and it would be a bad idea to even try. But I'd like to bring up a villain from Batman Beyond named Charlie Bigelow, alias Big Time. Bigelow, and I'm not calling him Big Time, had once been friends with Terry McGinnis, but by friends I mean that Bigelow made use of peer pressure to drag Terry into criminal acts, ending up leading Terry into juvenile home when a set didn't go as planned. A few years later, Terry, having become the new Batman due significantly to interest in making up for his mistakes, would meet with Bigelow again. They had realized that Bigelow was a kid always looking for shortcuts in the midst of combating Bigelow's criminal acts, which ended up including exploiting and eventually trying to kill Terry himself. There's a reason Terry would eventually realize that he had outgrown Bigelow, even if I agree with Bruce's alluding to his own experiences with Harvey Dent, who I need to mention was, even at his worst, still a better person than Bigelow and was genuinely stricken with compromising insanity, even when we can ignore the stuff with the vigilante judge. So I feel you there, Bruce. Oh, and one other thing with Bigelow that I didn't catch on until writing this point of the script, because I didn't think to overview this more thoroughly. But when I was looking for a clip of Terry's comment about Bigelow looking for shortcuts, I found Bigelow's establishing character moment, and it was him harassing Dana at a restaurant booth like the chauvinist that he is. Something that Terry was about to beat him up over, not recognizing him, only to stop once he did. How nostalgia can sting like a bee when you're allergic to bee stings. My point is that we can already have a cautionary tale about the toxic friend influence, and Terry McGinnis was lucky the sociopath involved there was far less capable of influence than the latter would have liked. Here, well, one look at Mings' subscriber count tells me everything I need to know about his scope of influence. But at least Mecca makes clear that he's having to choose between continued friendship with Mangs versus the right thing. Obviously, he went with the latter with his Mangs in July 2020 video, but I confess myself able to understand his pain. What would my experiences with a given fan of Live Alive? Still, at least with the right thing, you still have something at the end of the day. I'm just calling out Mecca fumbling this much in the first place. That's important, especially when the advanced communities in general will already refuse to care about the Mings issue or things like the abuses against a user named Yukikitsune that Nivelian was calling out in a post that was deleted in an effort to silence me. We have to fix this. There's one other thing I want to talk about before I leave off. When I recently went over some posts about the July 2020 allegations, I particularly noted a statement by Mason Elliwood, who eventually said in it, and I quote, "I'm a hypocrite doing exactly what I criticized Mings for, dodging responsibility, avoiding accountability, and trying to pretend unpleasant situations don't exist for the sake of my own image and mental health. That's why I stayed quiet for so long after my initial statements in 2017. That doesn't lessen anything he does, though, and I still feel it's my responsibility to say what I can in this scenario. I will take more responsibility moving forward, and I want to help and create a better community for Fire Emblem if I can." Well said, Mason Elliwood. I can tell you from my personal experience, Mason Elliwood, even if you could be right to feel like a hypocrite, you are still better than Mings, and you managed it so much simply by actually trying to fix things. I see you use your own experience, your own mistakes, to point out that being a coward doesn't help matters. I can welcome you to the club. Drinks are on me. But I also thank you for validating my actions on July 4, 2020, where I told Mangs to own up for behaviors as is in response to his obvious manipulation then. Even though bravery is far from the only virtue. But yes, fixing your mistakes is a good thing. Even if it's still something to avoid being complacent or abusive, which frankly you could say about anything. As long as you're hitting that point, the notion of making effort to fix things is still something you have over the Ming Empire. And I can tell you, it's how I found out about the county assessor's office, not knowing about my parents being deceased, leaving me to wonder if my mom was hoping I'd be doing something about her house and stumble upon points like this as a result. If you, Mason Elliwood, don't believe me about what I'm saying about you, well, obviously I'm acknowledging your statement in a positive manner as clearly as I am. You're doing something right. With all that said, this is a situation where Keep It Simple Stupid, unfortunately, is far less capable of working and getting it under control than it should be. Sadly, because of people who don't adhere to that in the first place. Whether it be Meng's failure to give Kusapon proper respect, the Meng's empire ignoring Meng's mistreatment of women in the interest of their entertainment, or Mecca making coordination about efforts to combat this so much more complicated by making communication so busted, This is a mess that is on par with my parents' house. And anybody who has cared about that, instead of claiming that the only proper response to anything bad happening to me is good, like a guy named Otaku D52 did, would have to realize that street cat defecation being right past the front door when I don't get proper support who will provide me needed equipment for managing proper cleanup would speak for itself. The best with Mings, meanwhile, punctuates that Mings should have been stopped well before July 8, 2020, but that hasn't happened at all. So Mings got to pull even more abuses. And Mings, for all that he deserves to be stripped of his power, is far from the only person responsible for these problems. No different from the devil in the point that the devil has no teeth. Just enablers, plenty of whom are jackals seeking any confirmation bias that they can find, no matter how flimsy it is to begin with. I call this all out, particularly because a lady's indefatigable warmth is priceless, to which I'd be lying if I said I believed otherwise. But also because gaming communities need to be more inviting for games to have improved value. When they're built to make sure that they're built and care about the little guy better, and to make sure game design can afford a lot better to measure twice before cutting once. Which I'm bringing up because the fighting game genre already becomes a cautionary tale for things don't improve with games as a whole. Maybe people think I'm just some stern doctor instead of a candy shop owner, but I know there are people who are kept from having fun by the unwelcoming, toxic environment that Pac-Man was created for fighting games. While I don't know if this would achieve enough welcome results, I can at least hope that this sets a foundation for combating the problems all around that allow Mings and his atrocities to even come into power in the first place.